All right. Good afternoon and welcome to the S.325 Committee of Conference. We have two actual proposals of amendment to consider. And I think what I would propose is that we go through 1.1, which is an update from Senator Watson's amendment. Because I think it reflects in all of the accessory on farm business compensation agreements, what was proposed yesterday. I just want to make sure that folks are okay with that. And then Ellen's there's yellow highlighting indicating on pages 4 and 5 and 6 some changes. So maybe walk us through those changes.
Sure. Ellen Czajkowski, Office of Legislative Counsel. Today you have draft 1.1 of the report of the Committee on Conference. Yesterday you had Senator Watson's proposal, and so that's why this is still 1.1, because that one had her name on it. But it reflects the conversation you had last night, and the changes are highlighted in yellow. Although I will say the first change is that the first instance of amendment is what was yesterday's 9th instance of amendment, and that's the language regarding the accessory on farm business discussion. And so it goes first sequentially because it's one of the first sections of the bill. So it's moved up to the front, but the only changes that are made from yesterday's version are highlighted. Do you want me to start here or skip over? Start.
You could start here.
Okay. So on page 2, this is the first instance of amendment. It's in section 6 of the House's version of the bill, and this is regarding the Act 250 exemption for accessory on-farm businesses. The first two subdivisions that are on page 1 are the underlying law and are not being changed. But on page 2, the language you were discussing yesterday, first subdivision 3, it starts with no permit or permit amendment. And that is because in yesterday's version, it started with until 2027. And so the sunset there has been removed. No permit or permit amendment is required for the construction of improvements for an accessory on-farm business of educational, recreational, or social events that feature agricultural practices or qualifying products or both, as defined in 24 VSA 441211A, Romanet 1, 2, if less than 1 acre of land is physically altered. Types of events may include concerts and farm stays with 5 or fewer dwelling units. To qualify for this exemption, the accessory on-farm business shall not have noise exceed 70 decibels at the property boundaries. And this was a suggestion from the editors, have events that continue past 10 p.m. as opposed to the whole business continuing past 10 p.m. So I think that's in line with your intent. And then just as, again, small grammar change next in subdivision 4. For the purposes of this subdivision, feature agricultural practices or qualifying products means that a host farm's agricultural practices or its qualifying products are a substantial component of any educational, recreational, or social event the accessory on-farm business hosts. The 10th instance of amendment is added at the end of the bill to give this section an effective date of next year, July 1, 2027. So this language proposed in this proposal of amendment will not take effect until next July.
All right, and Representative Chapin actually has an alternate, so we may as well, I guess, we'll just take it from the top and go into it. You want to frame it or just?
Sure. Where am I got? Not so this is only substantially different from what we just heard in draft number 1.1 in that it removes the 1 acre and the noise limitations, and it includes a little bit further the language from H128 from 2024. I think this final sentence for social or recreational events like weddings or concerts that may have a purpose wholly independent of the host farm's activities, agricultural practices, or qualifying products must be an integral component of the event to satisfy the definition of an accessory on-farm business. That was the next sentence in that paragraph from H128, and I think it adds some value around what we mean. So there's and it has the same change in the date. And my reasoning is that the 1 acre, the more I think about it and the more I talk with folks about it, there are a lot of challenges with 1 acre. It's very limiting. What about septic? What about landscapes where the septic would make sense in a different, like a farther away location? It's an arbitrary threshold that will be significantly limiting, and not equally limiting in different kinds of landscapes, and not equally limiting in different kinds of parcel sizes or scales of farms. And similarly, a lot of those challenges also apply to a sort of top-down statewide application of these 2 noise parameters. I think having some ability to for communities to determine what noise level is really important, and to have some space to regulate that. I'm getting really conflicting, sort of insanely conflicting legal opinions on whether municipalities can regulate for noise. What I heard last night and this morning is that there's clearly ways through performance standards that allow for noise controls. In that case, it needs to apply to all businesses equally in a municipality, but that is totally possible. So I'm proposing we take it out.
Can you say that again?
Yes, so I have gotten really from a variety of lawyers, including from our legal counsel, but also from other lawyers, including Steve Collier at the Agency of Ag, that's the entity that is supposed to advise farms on agricultural on-farm business, legal aspects, and advise around how to work with, and advise municipalities about how to work with AOFBs. He was very certain that it is possible, and there's legal precedent for that. Through the zoning performance standards that allow for noise controls, including for agricultural on-farm businesses, but that I believe it's in the performance standards, or event ordinances are also a tool that municipalities can use. I think in one or both of them, it would apply to all businesses. So you might create a standard like 70 decibels at the perimeter of a property boundary, but it would apply to all events or all businesses. So that's the feedback I've gotten after talking with almost a half a dozen lawyers over the past 24 hours.
So in a tier framing of mind, are we talking about all businesses and like tier 1, A and B and 4, or?
It wouldn't be related to tiers.
Okay.
It would be related to the whole municipality.
Okay.
But it is a tool that municipalities without zoning could utilize an event ordinance.
Okay.
And that's something they could stand up that would affect their community in their town as a way to address noise.
So just in the spirit of discussion here, I think we should have the 70 decibels in the, because it's going to be very difficult for towns to control it. Number one, if they do it, it has to apply to everybody, which is going to make the adoption of an ordinance very difficult. And then the town is signing up for enforcing it. And what we have here is somebody saying we don't want to have Active 50 oversight. And one of the requirements for not having Active 50 oversight is to say under 70 decibels. So then it becomes the state's responsibility through the Active 50 work to do it, which I think is much more realistic than setting communities up to have to deal with this problem. Because if you're talking about, I think farm weddings are wonderful. They're great, but it depends on what that can mean. A lot of things. And if it's music going, at whatever decibel, and you got little kids, and you live, very close, and there's all kinds of things that can go with some of these things. I think putting in statute, and again, it might not be right. The number might not be right. But the cards were dealt with in this committee, in this conference committee right now. with a floor limit that was totally embedded in. So I think that it's actually important that we have this in there to establish some parameters for, like, what are we really talking about here? And if it's really related to farm activity, then having, some limit of noise at the boundary, I think is something that we should do and not impose that burden on the municipalities and figure out how to do it.
So let's say somebody that lives next to this event doesn't like the fact that it's going on. Somebody shows up with a Harley Davidson. I mean, is that just gonna open this thing up to anybody being able to complain about anything? I like your idea of getting rid of I mean, 70 decibels is about the equivalent of not even a lawnmower. That's more, lawnmower is more than 70. So I don't think we need to be specific. I think that we should be able to leave the noise up to the municipality.
The other thing is that some of these events are culminating with fireworks. That's much more than 70 decibels.
And, if you're having a brew fest
Right.
and then everybody says, hey, let's have a party. And somebody has their banjo, so I agree with that part of it. It should be designated.
So if I can jump in here, my sense is that I'm gonna take a step back on a different topic here, because I think we agreed to have this as a sunrise, like we're setting out the effective date a year. My inclination would be so we have time to figure this out. My inclination would be to leave it and then a testimony next year to say, did we get this right? What about fireworks? What about this and that? But leave it as like a signal for like, this is a thing that we should talk more about. And I'd rather have the default be that it's there and let's talk about it. Knowing that there will be more process.
So essentially what you're saying is guardrails can come later.
Modifying the guardrails can come later, but I think you bring up an excellent point, right? And that's exactly the kind of thing that is why this is thorny. And so I guess that is how I would deal with it now, just to signal that like, this is a thing that we care about. And it matters.
So the current date is 2027.
July,
Okay.
yeah. But I'm also open to. Go ahead, Seth.
No, I really like Ann's amendment.
Did your amendment include the 1 acre?
I did include the 1 acre, but I am open to breaking that out. Unless you. Well, I guess under the same thing you just said, it will be a trigger for a conversation. Yeah, it's sort of like, it's almost like these are notes for what the future discussion should include. All right, let's walk through the rest of the.
Okay. The second and third instance of amendment are the changes to the public engagement plan, and that language has not changed.
Sorry, are we back in draft 1.1?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the next instance of amendment section, number 4, the fourth instance, that's the oversight committee, as well as the 5th amendment. Those are still in the oversight committee. That has not changed. And then there's the small change on page 4 in the oversight committee duties. yesterday you heard Senator Watson propose the word interpretation, just flipping it with implementation. So now it reads, the committee shall meet with the land use review board to ensure strong communication and coordination regarding the interpretation and implementation of the statutes amended as part of Act 181. The seventh instance of amendment is the language in the smart growth principles. That has not changed from yesterday's version.
Can I make a comment as we're going through, or should we finish what?
Go ahead.
Back to this. In this section, I appreciate the change that was offered to be more explicit about what we meant by, I think the original language was supportive housing, which I always found. Is that what
It
the
just said
original language?
supporting housing.
Supporting.
And so this adds on farm and farm worker, doesn't change any of the other words.
Thanks. So supporting housing felt like I wasn't sure what that meant. So I appreciate the attempt here. I think this is narrow, and much narrower than the intention of the house. And so I would offer a different phrase that, I think might help, and it is, and support, and how, I should be wearing my glasses. Including homesteading, small scale agricultural and forestry, and the housing to support these activities. Because on farm and farm worker is only relative to agriculture. And more importantly to me, on farm housing, I think might be interpreted to mean on the same parcel as the farm. And often these days, you really need to build additional housing, especially on conserved farms, on additional parcels, or be subdividing to accommodate that housing. I guess so I'm just trying to be even clearer to what I think the house's intention was. So I'll just read that again. It would be, and the housing to support these activities.
I appreciate that. My only hesitation is, and this, I don't know if this is how this would be interpreted, but if it's the housing to support these activities included, like, so we have to we have to subdivide and sell part of our farm in order to stay viable, which happens,
Absolutely.
then does that count?
I think it should.
So these are smart growth principles. They are aspirational goals. They are, I mean, I think in some ways we've already become too specific. Put that out there for those of you engaged in this negotiation. I mean, we're not talking about zoning, we're talking about what principles that would be addressed in a plan. I suppose could, yeah.
Say again?
Maybe also okay, actually, with that framing.
Yeah, the way I articulated my thoughts on this on the floor of the House was that this is really a values statement within the smart growth principles. And it's trying to make the smart growth principles sort of really relevant to Vermont and Vermont's working landscapes.
I think this one, in my initial reaction when I saw the section the way it was drafted, it's like encouraging the development of farms. And that's not something I'm in favor of. And
Oh, you mean
I read it.
Like building houses.
Like building
Yeah,
housing
building
on
housing on,
farms.
yeah, like, that's kind of not what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
At least encourage. But I think, yes, in the context of the smart growth principles,
I see that.
Yes.
it is true housing for the people who work on this. So,
that's true.
I think as a value statement that guides our smart growth principles, that then guides planning work. I think it's much more specific than what we passed on the floor of the House, but retains the intention around ensuring we have the housing needed to support our working lands.
Just a quick question, a clarifying question. Well, are we on the Byrd amendment part of it? No?
It's the other Burt amendment.
Okay,
Yeah, it's on the draft that we're looking at together right now.
Page 4 into 5.
okay, yeah,
Page 4E, and this was an amendment
yep,
on the floor of the House to, it used to say just serves to strengthen agricultural, so this is about smart growth principles. It's the definition of smart growth principles, and it used to say, before we made the amendment on the floor, serves to strengthen agricultural and forest industries while minimizing conflicts of development with these industries. And I think some of us who work in the working lands world at the scale of Vermont, the word industry can feel like larger scale business to a lot of people, and certainly doesn't include things like homesteading. That is definitely outside the scope of industry. And so the Burt Amendment added homesteading, small scale agriculture, added the phrase including homesteading, small scale agriculture and forestry and supporting housing. Just the phrase and supporting housing, I think was just funky wording that's vague and a little confusing. And so I appreciate the Senate's proposal to try and get clearer. But as I said before, I just think it's, for the working lands folks, it's actually really narrow to say on farm housing and farm worker housing. So I'm proposing it says, and the housing to support these activities, to be really clear and specific. And again, these aren't rules, like.
If you all are okay with it, I will. Okay. Okay. Then we'll take Representative Chapin's suggestion.
Okay. On page 5, the 8th instance of amendment, it has not changed, and that's regarding the Community Investment Program annual report. And then section 9, the 9th instance of amendment on page 5, this is amending the housing report from the department. And yesterday you all discussed how to clarify the types of units. And so the new language is in yellow. So data on how the report shall include data on housing that has been built in the areas exempt from Act 250 jurisdiction under the interim exemptions, including the number of units, the types of units, including the number of affordable units, market rate units, second homes, units for short-term rental, units for long-term rental, single unit dwellings, and multi-unit dwellings. The price and where the units were constructed.
Going to say instead of price, we talked about cost of construction. We probably didn't land on it. We just talked about it, so it's okay.
I remember that, but
I brought it up maybe just very quickly. Only because I don't really care, by the way, but because there is a difference between cost of construction and price. Which do we want? That's the only question I'm asking.
I wonder, sorry,
I think price is going to be more readily available.
that was gonna be my thought was, is the cost of construction visible?
Fair enough. Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, and then the 10th instance of amendment is new, but you have already discussed it. It's amending the effective dates. And so at the top of page 6, the effective date of the rest of the act is July 1, 2026, except that in section 6, which is NBSA 806081, subsection T shall take effect on July 1, 2027, and that is the accessory on-farm business language we were discussing in the first instance of amendment. And those are the changes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Let's go back to the first instance of amendment. Yeah. Please. Thoughts.
I'd like to go back and, I brought it up yesterday about the other two amendments. And kind of wondering, I know that I was told that, the Matos amendment is still in there, it was tweaked. Can we talk about that? Because I see that most of what the Senate put in there, is in there.
Well, it's true.
Yeah, so I just like an explanation of why you took our stuff out.
Sure. I'm not sure I remember the name of who introduced.
Benson was one, and I've got the information about both, and to go through it. So.
Let's find them on the.
Yes, on the side by side, I believe on page 4. I'll go, so on page 4 in the houses of the, on the side by. Um. No, it's not page 4, it's page 6. This is the language regarding the interim housing exemption for up to 50 units in either village centers or the transit areas. And then you were all just, in the House, you all were discussing 10 acres versus what the Senate had.
And this was how I heard the reinterpretation of the Matos amendment.
Okay.
So I'm just trying to bring myself back to our work on this. Sorry if I take a little bit of time to just articulate this. The way this came over to us, so I'm going to sort of go back. So originally it had said for 50 or fewer units constructed or maintained on tract or tracts of land of 10 acres or less, located entirely within areas of designated village centers and within 1/4 mile of its boundary with permanent zoning subdivision, or areas of a municipality that are within census designated urbanized area with over 50,000 residents. So, and the articulation we heard from Senator Matos is that this was, and the developer or developers who came in to talk about this was that it was driving the need for subdivision, and that maybe that wasn't necessary and was complicating things and taking extra time. And so we worked in a different way to address that concern, because we also heard in testimony that if you just do what the Senate did by striking constructed or maintained on a tract or tracts of land of 10 acres or less, and tract or tracts of land, we did confirm with legislative council that it does mean parcel. So it was requiring subdivision if it was larger than 10 acres. What we heard was, while getting rid of that would certainly make subdivision not necessary for a development, it also would allow the development to spread out. Say it's a 100-acre parcel, it no longer kept it within a dense area. And this is all related to an effort to have those sort of smart growth principles and have that density of in or adjacent to a village or designated. Right.
The center transit corridor.
Yeah.
So who interpreted that it was gonna spread out into other acres? I mean, what I heard was he had a specific area already designated, it was already
Yeah.
fed with infrastructure,
Yeah.
water and sewer.
Yes, that project.
I thought we were supposed to be building houses.
Right, so that project, so we made a change that still allows that
Okay.
project to happen
Okay.
without subdividing.
All right.
We just used different language that still requires it to be on 10 acres and compact.
Okay.
It just doesn't have to be on a separate 10-acre parcel. So
So
we
that's
just,
still
we
in there.
addressed the
So that's
issue
how you
but
tweaked it.
differently, yes.
Okay, thank you.
The other one, do you want me to keep going while I'm
Sure,
at
you're
it?
on a
Okay.
The Benson amendment.
Yes, the Benson Amendment
Page 7.
on the next page.
And I think that was primarily because some towns don't have zoning,
Right.
but they may have designated an area for growth and they may have infrastructure there.
Yes, so this provision would have been in our, what we agreed to on our committee's end, that this was really outside the intentions of Act 181 to enable housing exemptions in places that had zoning, sorry, not, just saying, enable Act 250 exemptions, but only in places that have zoning and bylaws so that there is at least municipal oversight. This went beyond what the housing exemptions that had been done in Act 181 and applied that concept in towns that don't have zoning and bylaws. And we heard from the Land Use Review Board that that would be extremely concerning, that it put lower income property owners at risk. It did not enable any oversight to make sure the 20% would be affordable units. There's just no oversight for land use regulation or affordability. And we just decided this was really far out with beyond the values of trying to allow housing to be built and without an Act 250 permit in places where there could be municipal oversight.
So what could the municipality have done to, I mean, they could adopt zoning, right?
Yes.
And is that the goal, to get them to do that before they build? I mean, you got,
Well, the housing could also get an Act 250 permit.
right,
So
Right.
these municipalities can encourage these projects to happen in their town by supporting that Act 250 permit process or adopting zoning and pursuing tier 1
Right.
status. Those are options.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so back to accessory on farm businesses. Where folks are at. Which language.
I'm happy as it is, so.
Let's stop. I'm going to-
You were saying, you're better. I just think that what this one. You can. Just really, I'm all for on farm accessory businesses, but we gotta figure out what that actually means. And there are, and this really, I know it attempts to put a parameter, but it really doesn't. And yeah, 40 weddings a year. Next one, concerts with alcohol served, fireworks serving, I mean, I don't know. And I know that that's not gonna be the norm, but there will be those who take advantage of anything that we don't draft about. And, you know, we've struggled with this issue for a lot of years and made some changes and over the years to try to get there, but it's hard because to do it the way that doesn't just blow the lid off. Especially in areas of the state with no zoning or whatever else, it's really kind of scary. So I like the idea of setting this up. We've got the board doing the report. And see if we can, you know, narrow it some, then the line, get the board. Checklist for next year, but you gotta have some, whether it's on noise, for instance, or. I don't think we can post that on towns. I don't think that's what's. You can't do it.
I don't think I could support it with the 1 acre. The more I thought about this and the more examples I fleshed out in my head, you know, if we want to put 3 cottages along a forest line, you know, is it one contiguous acre? Is it one total acre? Does it include septic? What if the landscape really requires the septic be in a different place?
I wasn't thinking that the one they could apply to cottages, but they have been reading on.
So I think this is too narrow and too vague, and I would support the amendment if we take 1 acre out.
Sure.
It's all
Really.
Okay.
I mean, I feel like we're taking up a new thing without any testimony and it's not a great use of our Mhm. We have a report coming back,
Yeah.
so.
Okay.
So
Okay.
we're striking one acre, leaving the rest, and price, adding, changing housing to support those activities. Otherwise, looks good on this.
Can I just raise the issue of the date and how it's in the middle of the construction season? Of any particular date, but
Yeah.
I'm just
good point.
wondering about.
Yeah,
It's the date, it's, there's no permit, so yeah, what?
How does that work?
So-
I mean, I guess I would assume that a project underway, how would that work without a permit? I mean, I don't think it's gonna matter because construction can take 2 years. So if this starts, this would be starting in July.
Yes.
And presumably the next legislature will look at this and make changes, we think. And so it'll change again. So this is a start date of a bill, which it would start this July otherwise. What's the difference?
So is it like shovel in the ground?
No, this is when
for the
this would,
exemption?
when this exemption would start would be July 1.
Right.
Same as this July.
So if you wanted to
Except-
build a project and not get an Act 50 permit, you could start
so let's make it
construction
in July this year.
on day one.
Should we do that?
Yes, once it went into effect.
Yeah,
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Done all your planning.
We've done all the planning in advance.
I mean, we know that July 1 is a date that is realistic for a lot of it to affect.
Yeah, most laws go into effect July 1, so you're thinking about,
If it's,
depending on when
if
it
it stays the
passes,
same or
will it-
changes, it'll go into effect.
Yeah.
July 1.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. Just like it would this year, it's only a year later. So I don't really think that month has relevance.
And products.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yep. Okay.
All right. Do you have time to make those changes for us? And
I have made those changes for you,
Oh, okay, great.
if you'd like it right now.
Sure,
Yes.
sure. We'll take a pause and go offline for a minute and let Miriam.
May I ask about one? This is just a spelling thing. Was previously in the second. Is this cause or causes? Looked like it should be causes.
Adrian.
And trying to find it on the previous, on yesterday's version, it was on the bottom of page 1.
Sure, I went back and forth, I think it could, it could be either. So if you can, I
Risks
think,
of using working lands, agricultural and forest land, and the cause of those risks. I thought that.
I agree. That's great.